What is this thing?
First of all,
Can
thank
we
you
get that
all
on?
for coming. It's a tough time of year, and to get a quorum with this many busy people is always a challenge, but thank you. Thanks so much. We've been doing a bunch of work since our last meeting. We worked on some governance documents, which we emailed to you. We had an attorney working with Annie work on that, and it basically explains our duties and responsibilities and then sets out the governance similar to the way the former Workforce Development Council had worked. But we thought you should take a look at this before we move forward with it. And we'd like to act on that today if you're comfortable doing that. The other thing that we presented at the end of the last meeting was a memorandum of understanding between the Vermont Department of Labor and the State Workforce Investment Board. And that's, not many people in the room felt comfortable about moving that document before we spent some time, so we created a committee of the Workforce Investment Board and spent a bunch of time working on that document. It was quite a process, and we emailed you the work that the committee did. Annie and her folks did a great job on this, and we had really good input from the committee members also, so we'll go through that with you today as well. So the first thing that we need to do formally is to approve the minutes of the September 30th, 2015 meeting. And
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
moved by Pat. And seconded by Dennis. And are there any edits? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstained? Okay, great. Now I'm going to turn it over to Michele, who's going to give an update on legislative reports about tech ed and workforce training inventory.
All right, these are fairly brief, just to really bring you in the loop. You've heard us speak of an attempt, an effort, and an ongoing activity on the part of the state to inventory, really, what is all the training that is going on? What are the monies that are being put to it, who's doing it, and what is the nature of it? So we can begin to really make sure that it is a clearinghouse that works, but also to identify the gaps and assist in all of our entities as they develop programs to make sure that we are doing it in a wise way. So coincidentally, at the same time that we were deploying the second phase of an inventory, or there are actually three have been done over the last, welcome to someone on the phone. Who's calling, please, and we'll get your name down. No, maybe we lost someone. So an inventory was carried out by the commissioner when she first came into office. The legislative committee also did an inventory. So we started to do another, and at the same time, the governor's office, through the chief performance officer, wisely recognized that this also had to occur, not just as the clearinghouse aspect, but what are we doing? Are we doing it well? And how well are those dollars being spent? So we have, that effort is well underway again. We've heard back from most state agencies. We're compiling that information. I would say by the time we have a next board meeting, there should be what looks like an updated version of the inventory. And then over time, we'll extend it to include even the private sector. There is a lot of work being done where dollars are being spent but farmed out to entities, and we're going to try to capture that. So that's the update on that. The second is the House Commerce Committee and the House Education Committee got a provision in the Economic Development Bill this last spring that called for a study to be carried out to look at how the Agency of Education will be building out an initiative to develop more high-skill, high-demand training in our tech centers secondary level. And these are called priority pathway programs of study. It's a very sophisticated model. I'd say sophisticated only because of its complexity, but it's a model that's being followed in the country, and that is that education that's being delivered in the is in collaboration, direct cooperation, operation even with our colleges, with our apprenticeships, with our training programs. It is to create a continuum of learning from grades 9 through what we say is 14. Of course, it's and all levels above that, and all the alternative, non-traditional types of training as well. The committee met. Its report is due. It has not issued the final report. The committee was made up of the Agency of Education, represented by Tom Alderman and Jay Ramsey, and now the new Deputy Secretary, Heather Boucher. The state colleges had a designee in Lyle Jepson, who was with the Tech Center in Rutland and is now with Castleton University. He represented the state colleges. I was there for Department of Labor, and Pat Moulton was there for Agency of Commerce. And Hugh Bradshaw participated representing Oak Rehab. The report has not quite been issued, but the early preview is, again, this was how the agency will carry out this initiative, and what are the recommendations. The recommendations are not as needy as one might hope, because the capacity of this group was a little more limited than I think the legislature expected, but we did produce 4 recommendations, and I had a page marked, but
You might need to talk up a little, Michelle.
I do?
If you're looking down, you got it.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
So we have, there are 4 very general recommendations that are coming out of this committee. The first is to extend the entitlement for our tech ed students, that is the high school students, to begin their in-depth learning in 9th grade. Currently, you may all know that right now the entitlement is for a 2-year period, which is junior and senior year, with some schools offering access at an earlier level. But the actual entitlement where funds follow to the tech centers does not extend to grades 9 and 10. The recommendation is to do that. That will, while everyone might agree it's a great idea, it has significant financial consequences, so that will be a challenge. A second recommendation is that that something has to be done. We could not get to the answer of how it would be how it would happen, but that currently for a tech ed student to be supported in the tech ed program, the regular high school loses the tuition for that student. It's highly disruptive. It's a disincentive. There's the overriding belief is that students are not sent to tech centers when that would benefit the student because the school can't afford to give away the dollars. So those are the 2 main recommendations that are coming out of that. As soon as we have a final report, we will share that, and it should be within a few weeks.
Michele, can I ask a question about that? So these are recommendations going to take legislative, statutory change to enact?
Yes.
Okay.
They require legislative change to make this happen. So it may be an issue that this board might choose to weigh in on. I just throw that out.
I would love us to spend some time on this at the next meeting, just, from somebody who works in economic development. 40% of Vermont's high school kids are not going on to post-secondary anything. And right now, we're only allowing juniors and seniors in high school into voc tech programs. And then of the 60% that go into post-secondary, we lose another 10% the next year. And where do they come? They all come back here. And if we're going to be doing them a service in their education and their families and the employers, to meet the needs of the employers, we've got to start using our technology centers around the state. And there can't be this competition within resources. It's got to be part of education. It's got to be the way that we pathway students into workforce readiness and certifications and things that enable you as employers to be able to employ people and for young Vermonters to get off on the right start. So this to me is one of the most important things that we could focus on. Lynn, I'm sorry.
Frank, just a question for you or Michelle. Is the intent to extend to 4 years of possible access, or is the extent to say a student could choose to come as a freshman or sophomore instead of? Because right now the legislature limits access to 2 years, and the measure of success for a technical center is placement in work and achievement of workplace credentials. I venture to guess that very few freshmen or sophomores are anywhere near ready to reach that level of completion. I agree they should be able to come earlier, but not at the expense of being able to do a real more advanced program when they're a junior.
Tom can back me up on this. I think we did not speak to that at that level of detail.
So that could really be a fly in the ointment that we'll be visiting 3 years down the road.
I think the idea is to open the door to designing more extended opportunities. That not to move what's happening now in junior and senior year necessarily to freshman and sophomore year, but to expand that opportunity for students so that we can build priority pathways programs of study that have more depth.
This is something that we would see a near immediate impact within a couple of years. You know, as a state, I don't understand all the different intricate points of how the money flows in between the agency, from our taxes to the agency to the districts, and I think a lot of us don't understand that. So we may be a bit naive in knowing, but it certainly seems like it's the best way to proceed for the children in schools, for the Vermont families, the taxpayers, and the employers, that we'll all win, and that we can see some benefit in a shorter term effect. When a lot of the things that, you know, that's a dynamic thing about training is in training, workforce training, you can see the benefits near immediate, right after an incumbent worker goes through a program or a new worker goes through a program. This is something that education can influence along the way. And then I'm on the UVM board, and I know UVM wants to see somebody and get them for 4 years and go all the way through. But everyone isn't going to go through higher education for 4 years. They might come out of high school and get in a job and then decide that they need a certification or an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or a master's degree and flow through like that. But if you look at our demographic challenges, this is a huge opportunity for Vermont. We're small enough that we can figure it out. The resources are going to be the tough thing to understand, and so we'll really need the Agency of Education's help to understand how we should do this in the best way. And it may not happen at the snap of a finger, but for us as a board to look at this, I think we would add a lot of value, especially when the legislature is going to be dealing with this. So if it's okay with you, we'll start to get this on the agenda for our next meeting so that we can have a dialogue. Sure.
Are you anticipating presenting this as legislative action?
If we can just repeat the question.
Are you anticipating to present this scenario at this next session with the concept plan?
Well, that's a decision that if this board wanted to advance an agenda legislatively, that's a decision this board would make. That we won't make that for you. I can tell you, we met with, the commissioner does an annual meeting pre-session with the House Commerce Committee, and they are quite clear that they want to advance this in some form. So how they do it in coordination with the education committees and the Senate is still being explored, but this is clearly on the table.
When were we anticipating our next meeting? Might be February? We did, yeah.
February.
So it would still be early enough in the session that we could have a really good informed presentation and a good dialogue so that we can move forward with hopefully developing a consensus as to how you'd like us to move forward and work with the legislative committees and the agencies and departments.
Well, this is a legislatively mandated study, so it'll be submitted to the entire
Yeah.
legislature, and they can.
They're gonna have it.
Move on
and
it
there'll
as
be,
they wish.
There's probably
and
bills
or-
floating around now that we're not even aware of.
And/or we could push these recommendations if we wanted to.
Janet?
So I think it's a great topic for future meeting, and one request I would have that would be with data to have in front of us, should it be available, is if we look at our traditional high schools, what is the fixed and variable cost of those schools? What is the, when you look at the cost of our high schools, what is the percentage that we looked at it from a business perspective and say, here are the fixed costs, and here are the variable costs? And I think that's a really important point when you start talking about moving money around. Right? And so if you don't look at it, the cost that way, I think it'll be difficult to move the discussion forward, but I'm not sure anyone has that data.
Thank you. We're keeping good notes on what is being the input right now. Hi, just remind everybody, introduce yourself when you speak up, please.
Hi, I'm Amanda from Green Mountain Power. I'm relatively new, haven't met most of you. I caught, Michele, when you said that there's currently a disincentive for the high schools to send students.
Yes.
And that you were looking to remove that disincentive, but I didn't catch how you were going to remove that disincentive.
Well, that's because Vermont has a particularly complex system of collecting funds from taxpayers to fund education, K through 12, and then it has a further complex system of dividing up those funds among towns and as between the high schools and the tech schools and the initiatives within those schools. So we do not have the answer to that. That is
There's no
not-
recommendation in the study.
There is no
right?
recommendation.
That has yet to be worked out.
Thank you.
Another question, sorry.
Commissioner
Just
Goldstein.
on the study and the, just wondering, your percentage of students that, sorry, I'm Joe Goldstein. The percentage of students that currently are at the career tech centers is what, like 10%? Do we have that idea?
Varies.
I'm asking that not
Varies.
just to get a data point, but what about the students that are not in the tech centers, and would there be an initiative to encourage career readiness for those students that are not at the tech centers? So another way of putting it is just that there'd be a pathway preparedness, or whatever the right word is, for all students in the education center, whether it's traditional or tech center.
It's a good question. So Act 77, the Flexible Pathways Initiative, that's in large part what that is about, is opening up opportunities for all students to take advantage of learning, education, training opportunities beyond the school setting and traditional courses, including career and technical education, work-based learning. There is an intentional expectation that all students would have opportunities around career exploration and some very specific skill development in that context. So yeah, that's part of this. This report that we're talking about now is one piece of that much bigger picture where we're trying to make sure every student has access to those kinds of opportunities.
Okay, then, kind of taking it that we should move in this direction for our next meeting.
Yeah,
We will. And we'll try to get information, and Janet, if we can get some data, we'll try to get that as well. I'm sorry.
Pat Moulton, I think if we could make sure that, I mean, we're gonna be releasing the study pretty quickly, right? So I think,
Yeah.
but.
You have to, right?
Yeah, so, if we could get the study like a week or so in advance of the meeting, and then, have the agenda talk about what parts of the study do we really wanna focus on, but I think, I agree with Janet, we should absolutely talk about this at the next meeting.
I'm presuming it will have been submitted prior to the beginning of the session.
Yeah.
And therefore, as soon as that final version is ready to go, it can also come here.
So can we get that out to the board? As soon
Absolutely.
as it's released, we'll give you some time to look at it. All right, great.
Thank you so much.